gentlemen. Welcome to the CGAP webinar titled, Why a Regulatory Sandbox? My name is Ivo Jeník, and I'm Financial Sector Specialist at CGAP, and I will be your host today. Regulatory sandboxes and other innovation facilitators have attracted significant attention, enthusiasm, but also skepticism and controversy. And that is why I'm so delighted to welcome today's panelists. 3 of them each represent a financial sector regulator with a very different approach to innovation generally and regulatory sandbox specifically. They'll be joined with world top-class experts on the topic. In the alphabetical order of their country affiliation, first is Wycliffe Shemaya. He is the acting chief executive of the Capital Markets Authority of Kenya. He has worked at the authority for over 22 years in various capacities and departments, from research to audit, compliance, market supervision, and market operations. Since CMA launched their regulatory sandbox more than a year ago, Shemaya has been chairing the Regulatory Sandbox Committee. Shemaya thus represents a regulator with a rich experience of designing and successfully running a sandbox. Hakima El Alami is Director of Payment Systems and Instruments Oversight and Financial Inclusion Department at Bank Al Maghrib. Hakima joined the Bank Al Maghrib 23 years ago as an executive in charge of financial analysis and corporate ratings, and since then held various senior positions in charge of payments and payment systems. At her current position, Hakima is responsible for national payments and financial inclusion strategies. She represents a regulator with an approach that uses other regulatory tools than regulatory sandbox to promote innovation in Morocco. Melchor Plabassan is Director of Technology Risk and Innovation Supervision Department at the Central Bank of Philippines. With over a decade of supervisory experience, Mel has played a key role in reshaping the regulatory mindset towards a more progressive approach on technology risk and innovation supervision. He's been responsible for supervision of technology and cybersecurity risk, including emerging technologies. And obviously, Mel represents a country and agency that championed a test and learn approach in the Philippines, but really globally. Joining the discussion will be world top experts. Sharmista Apaya is a senior financial sector specialist in finance, competitiveness, and innovation global practice at the World Bank, where she analyzes fintech and its application to financial inclusion. She works to support governments and emerging economies to identify key regulatory and policy challenges and solutions to enable fintech products, services, and business models. Prior to joining the World Bank, she was the head of the Fintech Accelerator at the Bank of England. Sean Duff is a vice president of strategy at Kiva, where he works with governments, regulators, and international development partners on the implementation of Kiva Protocol, a decentralized digital identity and credit reporting platform designed to advance financial inclusion in developing markets. He also worked as a senior policy advisor at CGAP. A financial services lawyer by training, Sean previously practiced with international law firms, and he's also co-authored and authored several publications on regulation, innovation, and regulatory sandboxes. The collective expertise and experience today promises a great discussion, and I'm truly pleased to welcome Greta Bull, CEO of CGAP, who will provide a context for the conversation with her opening remarks. So Greta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivo, and good morning, afternoon, evening for everyone, wherever you are. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar on lessons learned thus far from building regulatory sandboxes and other regulatory innovation initiatives from around the world. We have a great panel today made up of practitioners who've worked hands-on in the regulatory innovation space. As I think you all know pretty well by now, we at CGAP believe that financial services are important to the economic lives of poor people, and especially women. We think they have an important role to play in how people generate income, gain access to essential services, and build resilience to shocks. Imagine how different your lives would be if you didn't have an account in which you could receive payments. You had to queue in an office to pay bills. You couldn't receive money from friends and relatives in times of trouble or access a loan. You couldn't buy a car or a house on credit and insure it against downside risks. You didn't have health insurance in this time of COVID pandemic. We use financial services every single day, but many poor people do not have access to these formal services, and it complicates their lives immeasurably. Innovation in financial services delivery has been crucial to ensuring that we can get affordable financial services into the hands of those who need it the most. And digital finance has enabled our ability to get financial services to low-income households, and that trend has accelerated during the COVID pandemic as we were forced to move away from cash and into digital means of delivery. We've come a long way, but there are still pretty persistent barriers in our ability to serve the poor, including limited access options in remote areas, the challenges of onboarding customers who have minimal identification documents, the relatively high unit costs of serving poor clients, and limited uptake of services due to unsuitable and relatively limited product offerings. Every year, new innovations come online that help us move incrementally towards the goal of universal financial inclusion. A few decades ago, credit cards were the big innovation, then ATMs, and more recently, mobile money. What we're now seeing, though, is an acceleration in technology-enabled business model innovation. It's moving us much closer to that goal of universal financial access. Not only are innovations like QR codes, data aggregators, eKYC utilities making it easier to engage poor people with formal financial services, we're also seeing finance embedded into many other digital services like e-commerce, social media, and gig platforms, which puts a huge amount of pressure on the financial sector to keep up with an ever-accelerating path of innovation. Policymakers have a particularly important role to play in harnessing and challenging innovation in ways that can benefit low-income customers. Regulation can either accelerate or slow down innovation. Regulators, famously being willing to let the private sector experiment with new methods, gave us M-Pesa, which has completely changed the way that we think about digital financial services. And more recently, regulators are leading a push for greater innovation in places like India and the European Union, tackling complex undertakings like faster and more inclusive payment systems, increasing competition by opening up data traditionally held closely by banks, and building data systems that should increasingly put consumers in control of their own data whilst managing privacy and protection concerns. Regulators in the digital age face many choices, but also tremendous pressure. On the one hand, to keep up with trends, to be responsive to the needs of the market, and to harness innovation for bigger goals like financial inclusion. But they also face challenges in making sure that those systems protect customers, as well as managing market stability and integrity. They also face limitations such as overly restrictive regulatory regimes, limited resources and capacity compared to the private sector that is pretty well resourced and changing rapidly. And they have few established tools to oversee innovation effectively. The digital age is challenging regulators in ways we have not been challenged before, requiring that they consider topics as diverse as cybersecurity, competition policy, market conduct, data privacy and protection, reg tech, soup tech, and technology-enabled solutions like biometrics and QR codes. You get the picture. How they choose to harness the many opportunities and risks innovations bring about will determine the future of their markets for many years to come, and success of their efforts to advance objectives such as financial inclusion. This is why CGAP recognized innovation facilitators such as regulatory sandbox as a topic of great interest several years ago when we began this work. But we've also learned that it's a topic that can lead to distraction and suboptimal outcomes if not properly understood and managed. Our work is intended to help regulators to navigate the options available to them and to make wise choices in line with their objectives and mandate, whilst keeping the objective of full financial inclusion in mind. Before handing over to Ivo and our panelists, I'd like to thank our many thought partners who've worked with us in this space over many years, including the World Bank, the FSD Network, and many regulators, including those on the panel. You've enriched our work on this important topic, and we continue to learn from you as you share your valuable experience with the larger financial inclusion community. So thank you all for joining us, and welcome. Over to you, Ivo.
Thank you very much, Greta. Thank you for your thoughtful remarks. They really helped to kind of provide a context for the discussion today, and I believe that we will touch upon many of the issues that you've raised. Before we get into the discussion, just a couple of words on logistics. Throughout the webinar, your microphones will remain muted, and I'm talking to the attendees, obviously, but you can also you can use the chat function to ask questions, and I encourage you to do that actually because we'll be collecting the questions throughout the webinar and then turn to them in the Q&A session. We're planning to spend around 50 minutes on the moderated discussion and then around 20-25 minutes on the Q&A. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all of you who've registered. So without any further delay, let me turn to the panelists, and let's start with the first question, which I think is really the key question in minds of many regulators and policymakers and policy advisors contemplating innovation regulation and innovation facilitators. And that is really, what are they good for? What is the rationale for choosing one of those many pro-innovation tools and what they're expected to do? So what are the objectives and rationale? And I'd like to start with Shemaya from the Capital Markets Authority of Kenya, because CMA, as mentioned more than a year ago, launched and then started implementing a regulatory sandbox. So Shemaya, can you explain why you've decided to do so? What were the challenges you were seeing and issues you were trying to address, and why you thought that sandbox was the right tool to address them? So we might have lost actually Shemaya. I don't see him now on the list. Hopefully he will come back. But let's start with Hakima in that case. So Morocco is an example of country that does have a very vibrant fintech ecosystem, and policymakers there have been doing a lot of things to promote innovation and promote fintech. There is a lot of interesting news about using blockchain technology for advancing financial inclusion. For example, you adopted last year a digital strategy, but I'd like to hear about, what this digital strategy includes, what are the initiatives that you've put in place, and why you decided not to make regulatory sandbox one of them. And please unmute yourself.
I have to unmute.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So let me first thank you for considering the Moroccan experience in this discussion, because we really did a full job studying all regulatory approaches and all the approach that our central bank can put in place to promote innovation in our markets, and see which one can correctly and rapidly respond to the market needs. So before talking about the digital strategy of the central bank, let me please tell you some words about what we did before to enhance the payments markets and financial inclusion in Morocco. Since 2013, Morocco we were convinced and aware of the role of digital financial services in speeding up financial inclusion and expanding it to the most excluded segments, in particular in the remote area. That's why in Bank al-Maghrib we worked to promote the access of the non-bank players to the payments markets, and adopted in 2014 the reform of our banking law, which introduced a new category of non-bank institution able, in addition to credit institutions, to open payment accounts and offer payment services. That was the first step to enhance innovation in Morocco. Because the so-called payment institutions have been set up with the aim of creating an innovative environment and a competitive market for payment services, in particularly through mobile financial services. As the regulatory framework came into effect in 2017, 16 licenses have been delivered to date. Also, in terms of enhancing innovative payment solutions, Bank al-Maghrib has worked since 2016 to closely with all the payments actors and with telecom regulator to build up a specific ecosystem of mobile payment solution. The national mobile switch was operational at the end of 2018, providing all the support to different actors to connect their system to the national payment system and ensure the interoperability between all the M-wallets issued. and we have also issued by the end of 2018 the framework regulating the issuance and the security of M-Wallet. Now, concerning the digital strategy, Bank al-Maghrib has adopted it in 2019, aiming to place the central bank as an innovation catalyst for the market. Also aware that fintechs can exceed the spectrum of payment institutions, our institute conducts a benchmark on the experiences of other central banks to support this industry, and we had run a technical assistance with the assistant of the World Bank to wisely think about the regulatory approach to support fintech regarding the Moroccan context. The study allows us to propose a certain number of recommendations quite quickly. The first one is we have to act as a catalyst for the fintech market and support new startups. We have to create a direct dialogue between fintechs and the professionals, especially to help them with the regulatory questions. And we have to create a fintech office, a unique point to guide project leaders and exchange as far as possible on the steps and diligences to be carried out to streamline the approval process. As a result, in the central bank in Bank al-Maghrib, we have chosen the innovation office and advice unit approach rather than setting up a regulatory sandbox. Because we think that rather than just jumping on the regulatory sandbox, we should first understand business barriers, consider the whole package of incentives from the perspective of fintech firms and investors, and address the many challenges that can enhance the growth of the fintech firms. Also, in our point of view, building a sandbox may require a specific law or regulatory reforms to allow regulators to build this testing environment. We need also costly investment to organize and build the sandbox at its best standards. And this approach can also have a negative impact on the market by creating an unfair competition by giving preferential treatment to fintechs that goes to the sandbox. That was our approach to support and enforce fintechs in Moroccan context.
Thank you very much, Hakimat. You raised very important points, and I hope we will come back to some of them, including the legislative changes required, the resources, and others. So let me now turn to Mel. Mel, early iteration of your test and learn approach is well known, I believe, in the financial inclusion community because it helped you a decade ago to really test and codify a regulation for mobile money. And I think it's been emulated really all over the world. So one can argue that what BSP did for test and learn approach is very similar to what FCA in the UK did for a regulatory sandbox. Now, it seems from some of the recent press releases and public documents issued by the Central Bank that Central Bank is moving away from the test and learn approach towards a regulatory sandbox. And I'm wondering whether that's the case, and if yes, why, and if no, what might be the confusion. So can you say a little more about that?
Yeah. Thanks, Ivo. I hope I'm coming to you loud and clear. I'm having quite difficulty with my internet. Anyway, can you hear me, Ivo?
Very well, yeah.
Yeah. I think more than moving away or upgrading, the BSP the best of both worlds. We're also equipping ourselves with multiple approaches with different depending on the situation or the circumstances. Of course, we would like to carry on that agility and that creative spontaneity associated with our test and learn approach, which I think is in the core of the BSP. It's in our DNA. But also, at the same time, we also recognize the importance or the value of standards and more permanent structures associated within a regulatory sandbox approach. That's why we are also gearing towards that. And especially now that emerging markets and fintech layers are also maturing and scaling up. So we are taking the best of both actually, Ivo.
So would you say, Mel, that you basically don't need really or didn't need really a full sandbox so far, and your current approach, the test and learn, have been working quite well?
The test and learn, I can say, has been working quite well, except that we would like to formalize certain aspects of that test and learn approach. So there will be more standards, and there will be more permanent structure. I think that's the major improvement right now. And we are also sharing that test and learn approach with other financial regulators. So it's now not just limited to the BSP. So the test and learn approach can also be adopted by other financial regulators. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not moving away, it's not upgrading, it's taking the best of both worlds and making sure that we have multiple approaches and techniques which we can use given a certain situation.
Excellent. I think we will come back to some of the practical examples, but maybe one quick follow-up question on this. You know, we've heard from Hakim, for example, the concerns which are very frequently voiced by regulators, and I think there are reasonable concerns, obviously, about the unfair competition. Can you quickly say, you know, whether this has been part of how you think about the framework you're putting in place, or rather, how are you trying to avoid the risk of a special treatment given to the firms that are either in the test and learn or sandbox regime?
I think we have always encouraged a level playing field. So there won't be, in fact, it's open to everyone. So those that would qualify with some of the non-negotiables, with some of the standards, can easily try our test and learn approach. No special treatment. They are subject to the same rules. And they are also closely monitored. They are subject to the same regulations.
Okay, excellent.
But again, more than I think it has more positive impact with respect to competition, because at the end of the day, if there are players that would find it economically viable to proceed with their proposed solution, then there would be more players, similar to how we did it for the e-money. Because previously, financial services are dominated by banks. And right now, there are also other non-bank players, such as EMIs, that are also offering similar products and services to the public.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let me now turn. I don't still see Shamaya, but now let me turn to Sean Duff, actually, who has helped Capital Markets Authority in Kenya to set up their sandbox. And maybe, Sean, you can step in and say a little bit about, you know, what were the challenges and issues that CMA was trying to solve with the sandbox solution.
That's great, and I'll step in for Shmai here and welcome everyone. Yeah, the CMA Sandbox project is interesting in that it was nested within a broader set of national policy discussions. So there was a Kenya Vision 2030, which is a kind of a national policy framework for thinking about the future of the country, and then also the CMA's own 10-year capital markets master plan, both of which ask the CMA to take a hard look at everything it was doing to promote and continue an innovation environment in the Kenya capital markets. As Greta mentioned, Kenya has been a hotbed of innovation in fintech for a very long time. Obviously, the birthplace of M-Pesa, but that the CMA felt that it needed to in order to kind of keep that innovation environment alive and healthy, that it needed to to take a hard look at how Kenya was competing regionally and globally in the capital market space. One of the pillars of its master plan specifically called out the need to develop a responsive legal and regulatory framework to inspire confidence and facilitate responsible innovation in the marketplace. So with that sort of statutory imprimatur in mind, it undertook a variety of different consultative activities. In 2017, issued a public consultation on sandboxes, specifically gathered inputs from the marketplace about whether a sandbox would be helpful in spurring innovation in the capital market space. It also looked to a third-party consultant to engage in interviews with the fintech ecosystem and gather inputs on what were the blockers to new innovative activity in the country. One of the recommendations that came out of those consultations was a sandbox framework, and with that imprimatur from the marketplace, CMA undertook a very robust design process, and spent months, and I think even years, kind of thinking about different elements of the sandbox program. And I think I haven't kept recent tabs on progress of the sandbox, but I think they've now graduated several companies from that initiative, and it's going quite well.
Thank you, and hopefully Shemaya will be able to dial in back, and we may hear about some of the examples. So let me now turn to the second area I'd like to discuss, which also is a very important topic for policymakers thinking about innovation and regulation, and that is the impact of those initiatives. And we've heard quite different approaches from our regulators so far, sort of a very holistic legislative change and engaging in dialogue with fintechs, a test and learn approach being sort of formalized into a more structured one, and then regulatory sandbox, obviously. So Sharmista, let me turn to you because you've been working with many countries on innovation regulation. And I'd like to ask, where do you see innovation facilitators generally and sandboxes specifically helping your client countries most? And what are the changes that you've seen as a result of countries implementing either sandbox or an alternative? If you can give practical examples of that.
Thanks, Ivo, and thanks for having me here today. So just as a broad base, the way we describe innovation facilitators, and this is, I guess, something that we've borrowed from the EBA, and I think CGAP and World Bank have described this similarly, is that innovation facilitators are sandboxes, innovation hubs, and regulatory accelerators. Now, as we all know, sandboxes are sort of on the rise and have been on the rise since 2016 when they were first started. And in the last count, and we've just releasing some numbers on this, is that we've seen 73 sandboxes that have currently either been announced or are in operation, and this is across like 57 countries. And for those who are interested, I think today the World Bank we're releasing a page where you can sort of download all the data and sort of see the different testing numbers and see which ones are financial inclusion related. So you can play around with the data and actually try and do your own analysis from it. And also 70% of these sandboxes have been in sort of emerging markets. So it's obviously a very important tool. It's something that regulators are tending to use quite often. And the main reason for using it has been to create an evidence base for regulatory change or to get a faster route to market for fintech firms. And while we've seen them happen in some places, for example, Thailand, there was the QR codes, which came through the P2P lending, robo-advisors, that was happening in the US as well, where they used robo-advisors for algorithmic trading and found that they were more comfortable with it. One of the most common examples, one of the most useful examples we've seen is the eKYC regulations in Malaysia. There's also been sort of private e-currencies in Astana, all of which have been helped, and the thinking has been helped by using regulatory sandboxes. But actually what we've found from all sort of the work that we've done in countries is that the most useful has been the dialogue that firms have been able to have with regulators. So having been a previous regulator myself, one, fintech was an area that we didn't always have a relationship with, so this opened up the dialogue. And second, regulators quite often tend to have these big sort of large walls around them. And having a sandbox and having that sort of open discussion, which wasn't the very hard and fast rules, but more the we don't exactly know where we fit into the regulatory framework. Can we come have a conversation with you? I think that has been really useful. So other than the dialogue, I'd say the partnerships in the market, potentially the competition. So coming back to the point that Greta raised about, having much more targeted products in the marketplace, has also been hugely useful. And it's mainly been a catalyst for change. A catalyst for change both within regulators, so breaking down silos within the organization itself, because the tone from the top has changed and regulators have been forced to be a bit more agile, and the catalyst with the external market. So I'd probably say that those are the biggest changes that we've seen in countries. That being said, there are challenges. There's challenges from, we said legal mandates. There's challenges from having a number of different regulators. And then one of the biggest challenges has actually been in measuring impact. So, your question about what is the change that you've seen? It's sometimes a bit hard to actually relate the change that you've seen to a regulatory sandbox. So we quite often say regulatory sandbox should be one of the tools that you use in your entire suite for encouraging innovation in the marketplace. It shouldn't just be the only one. Some regulators look at impact in terms of, the number of firms that have gone through the sandbox or the number of regulatory changes that have happened, but there are also other nuanced measures that potentially regulators need to think about, such as impacts on sort of financial inclusion, impacts on the firm, how consumers have reacted to it. So it's a nuanced area, and again, something that we've tried to put out in our paper that we're releasing this week about how to actually measure impact, and the importance of tying your objective and your impacts together. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great points. And particularly the point about the dialogue that being really important, I think that resonates with what we've heard from Hakima as well. So let me turn to you, Hakima. You mentioned, the changes really reaching all the way back to 2014 with introducing the new law, and then gradually evolving with more and more initiatives being sort of added to promote modernization of payments and non-bank providers, increasing competition. So some of those are newer initiatives, some of those have been in place for some time. What have you seen as a result of those initiatives? How are they living to your expectations? And maybe can you provide a couple of examples where you've seen impact on the industry and customers resulting from those initiatives?
Thank you, Ivo. The first, I think that the first result was, or the first impact was first within our organization, because we create at the Central Bank, and within my proper department that I supervise, we create this one-stop fintech in 2019, and this unique office was or is designed as a welcoming and open environment that aims to speed up and simplify the process of communication between innovators and the regulators, and it brings significant benefits to all stakeholders. The single window is the mechanism that allows fintech to formulate very rapidly their question and request regarding the regulation of the services offered in the Moroccan context. This approach allows us to meet and attend more than 35 fintechs, Moroccan and foreign firms. As I said before, this meeting has two side benefits. In one hand, we explain to them our legal and regulatory framework and how they can answer to the market, to the Moroccan market. And in other hand, it helps us as a regulator to measure the attractiveness of our market and what is the new innovation or type of services that should be regulated to widely open our market. As a result of the dialogues we are now working on some new reforms on our regulation to facilitate the entry of the new actors like payment aggregators, credit aggregators, or payment facilitators, because we have this new type of actors represents more than 20% of fintechs that we have already met. As a result, also we are working now on building a strong cooperation with the other regulators like insurance regulator, financial market regulators, our digital development agency. This cooperation, wide cooperation, will help us to set up a national fintech strategy and a common vision for all the sectors, not only banking sector. We in the same time, the Central Bank is also working in promoting innovation in its own processes. We have put in place an innovation lab, and to re-engineering to make re-engineering internal processes by introducing innovative solutions. And I give you an example from the oversight department. We are working now with the actors like banks or payment institutions and the other financial market infrastructures on how we can improve the collects of regulatory reporting and how we can automatically analyze this mass of information, this huge mass of information collected, and how to be more reactive as a supervisor. Now, and
Hakima,
since, yes?
May I ask you one thing? So,
yes.
You mentioned the fintech office, and I'd like to kind of bring it to what Sharmista mentioned about measuring the impact. Are you measuring impact of that office, for example, in terms of how many firms approach you and what are the questions? Are you kind of tracking that?
Yeah. I mentioned that before, Ivo. We put in place just communication between fintechs and this one-stop fintech, and this communication, that allow us to really get the needs of the firms, the different kind of incentive that they need, and the kind of new amendments in our law banking that we have to introduce to allow the firm to enter to the market. And as I mentioned before, Ivo, we are now working on some new amendments to introduce in our banking law to allow this many fintechs to enter into the market.
These are really great examples. Thanks a lot. So I think we do have a Shamaya back on our webinar. So let me ask you, Shamaya, we're talking about the impact that those different initiatives have been having on the market and consumers. And I'd like to ask you about your regulatory sandbox, because we've recently read that there are first graduates from your sandbox. So if you can share information about, what's been the impact of your regulatory sandbox initiative so far, who are the firms emerging from it, and what impact do you see or envision on the market and customers in Kenya?
Thank you, Ivo and attendants. First, just to apologize, I threw myself out of the whole forum, and apologies. I'm now back. I I won't be on video just so that I'm consistent. The question is good enough. I think since we started our sandbox, we've seen a lot of interest actually, quite a lot of interest, both locally and also external. And actually what I can see as the value are the ideas we are seeing coming into the sandbox. The ideas which are about like, how do we automate most of the processes that initially have been purely manual. So I'm talking about customers, clients having an option to get the same service, but at a very, very convenient rate. Now, you spoke about a few which have graduated. One really is just automating the process that clients in collective investment schemes are able to invest quickly and then, of course, get their value in a very short time. And this can be done on a daily basis, after 2 days, whichever, and you get your returns, and you're able to put your money somewhere else, something which has never been done before. The other one, which is just about to graduate out of there, is now a platform where
Oh, I'm afraid that we might have lost Wycliffe's audio again. But I believe he was about to talk about the equity crowdfunding platform that's graduating.
Of course, we are meeting those who require funds.
Now you're back, Wycliffe.
Yeah, you can.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, we lost you when you were talking about the platform that is about to graduate.
Yes, this is really a crowdfunding platform which is helping those SMEs mainly, small medium who can access finance, say, in the banking sector and other sources as we know it, to access funds from those who can give them. And therefore, for us, it's a plus because sometimes if you are just individuals, small companies, you don't have access to finance. This time, because of this platform, then we have those who can access these funds after they have been profiled and of course improve their value addition within the economy. So for us, we see a lot of value in terms of we are seeing a bit of automation of manual processes which we knew and were a bit laborious. Now, it makes this very convenient to most of the Kenyans who are accessing those services. But just to say, for us, it's the number of new ideas which we are seeing, the way people want to do things in a different way, using blockchain, cryptocurrency assets mainly. We are hoping this is going to change a bit of the landscape and therefore just add a lot of value in what we are seeing as the current status position.
Just a quick follow-up question, Shemaya. Did you have to change any regulations or laws to allow the two graduates to operate in the market? Did you have to adopt, for example, crowdfunding regulation or not really?
No, what we have done actually, and perhaps maybe I wanted to explain why we went the sandbox way. From experience, we noted we took too long maybe to bring a regulation into existence if there was an idea which was good. So the time to market was too long for us. It meant going through the very laborious ways of getting laws in place. So Sandbox replaces a bit of that because it gives those who have ideas a room of testing their ideas before fully getting into the marketplace. But now, coming back to your question, yes, for the crowdfunding platform, initially we didn't have any framework. So what we have done, we do have a provision within the law that allows us to give guidance in terms of a very initial framework, which is not the law, but just guiding on how the innovation is going to operate within the market when they go live. Now, we are still in the process of working on our crowdfunding regulations, all the law, but what we have done is now to come up with a framework to allow this new entrant now to operate in the market as we work on our regulation. Because I think there are issues to do with investor protection, how you may just do your business in a more fair manner. But the other innovation, we didn't require to have a change or introduce any provisions in the law, because what they were doing, they were actually then letting processes that were within the existing law. So we have had to adjust for the crowdfunding because we are still working on our regulatory framework.
Excellent. So I would like to pause on this point, to be honest, because I think this is very important description of how the interplay between sandbox and regulation works. And I would like to ask our two other regulators, maybe let me start with Mel, but I'd like to ask Hakima as well. Is this something that you also see with your test and learn approach, working in a similar way, helping you to react more quickly and come up with regulatory measures quicker than what would be possible before? And I'll have the same question for you, Hakima.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages really of Sandbox is ensuring that the regulators are able to adapt a dynamic policy framework. In fact, a lot of our regulations right now, particularly on e-money and even virtual currencies, are being amended right now to take into account some of the learnings from our test and learn approach. So yes, test and learn helps us to be more dynamic and to evolve fast in terms of amending or revising existing regulations.
Thank you, Mel. And Hakima, you did make it very clear that the legislative and regulatory change is part of your thinking, and now that you're using the FinTech Office input to make the changes in regulation and laws. But would you also say that the process is faster because of those initiatives than what it would be before?
Yes, I think that our approach was to put in place this single window and to have this direct dialogue with fintechs it's also it's really a win-win way, because we understand their needs, and for them it's more it's very fast for them to understand the regulation and what's the need from the regulator's perspective. And we when we have this direct dialogue, it's really fast for us to introduce the good reform and in our law and regulation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we may come back to some of these points during the Q&A session, I believe. But let's turn to the third area of discussion. I'd like to turn to our international experts, both of them, for this question, which is around the cost and resources that are needed to. Let's start with the sandbox, but you're obviously welcome to talk about other initiatives that promote innovation. So maybe let me start with Sean first. Sean, we heard about objectives and impact. But what do you see as a prerequisites for a successful sandbox in terms of resources, but maybe not only resources needed? What are the components that countries should have in place to really feel comfortable about the future success of sandbox?
Yeah, thanks, Eva. And our resources, maybe I'll defer that a little bit, because I know CGAP and World Bank have this great multi-jurisdictional survey that talks about the specific resource needs of different sandboxes. On prerequisites, I would say that the central prerequisite for a successful sandbox is actually a clear regulatory hypothesis on how the sandbox will contribute to the regulator's objectives or mandates. That's less about sort of infrastructure and resources and more about having a clear understanding of how the sandbox fits within a suite of regulatory tools and objectives. I think this relates to the conversation we just had about how regulators are using sandboxes either to promote the interests of a single firm, sort of understand why a single firm might be experiencing a regulatory barrier for entering the marketplace, but instead think about using the sandbox as a vehicle for understanding issues that are common to multiple firms and using the sandbox as a venue for developing an evidence base to develop a set of regulations or policies that impact the entire market. I think the difference between those two approaches, is based on having a clear hypothesis for the work that a sandbox can do to help you advance your objectives. Now, the saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And I felt like in the early days of the fintech revolution, there was a strong sense that regulators needed to do something to keep pace with innovation in the marketplace, but not a clear sense of what the intervention was to that would kind of best promote those aims. So sandboxes sort of filled that void in the early days, and the void, I think, as Sharmista mentioned already, was maybe more of a capacity and knowledge gap on both sides of the equation. On the one hand, innovators sort of lacking regulatory acumen, technologists coming to a regulated marketplace for the first time and not necessarily knowing how to have that conversation with regulators. At the same time, regulators not necessarily having a clear understanding of the technology that innovators were bringing to bear in the marketplace. And sandboxes help bridge that knowledge gap. Now, I think we see regulators around the world have developed better capacity on the technology side. The conversation between regulators and innovators has become more collaborative, and we have a new suite of tools to help regulators really kind of advance those conversations. And I think the principal goal of the paper, maybe you mentioned at the start, Ivo, but that you just released on how to build a regulatory sandbox, really gets to that question, and helping regulators crystallize their hypothesis for having a sandbox in the first place.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So definitely very important to have clearly defined objectives. And so Sharmista, Sean already put you on the spot by referring to the paper, the survey. But more generally, you mentioned 73 sandboxes around the world. What do you see as the prerequisites for a successful sandbox, and how do you think about resources when you deal with your client countries that may be interested in sandbox but don't necessarily have, too many resources and capacity to really implement those many initiatives that are potentially available to them?
Yeah, thanks. So to the resources question, Ivo, just to mention, the survey that we all did together last year, I think we got quite a wide range of answers. I think it ranged from, $200 to about $1 million. So it was, a very broad spectrum of how much this actually costs. I would echo Sean's comments to say that the most important thing is to have that objective or that hypothesis to basically say, what is it that we're testing? Quite often, we've worked in countries that have basically been like, we want to, foster the fintech environment and bring more players into the market, but the eligibility criteria is quite tight in that only licensed firms can apply to the sandbox. So it sort of negates the hypothesis right at that first step. The other thing for a lot of regulators is that when they want to set up a sandbox, and potentially, like you said, they don't have as many resources needed, is that we've seen potentially about 3 different models of governance structures that have worked. Sometimes they've had individual departments, similar to what the FCA has done, which they have recruited. FCA has about 100 people, but there's been a number of other examples where they've got about 30 people that are wholly dedicated to just working on fintech and working on the sandbox. In other jurisdictions, like, say, Jamaica, what has been interesting is that they've used a hub and spoke model. So they have a small core of, say, 4 or 5 people, and then pull in people from other departments as and when they think it's necessary, which I think works quite well, depending on sort of the the type of firms applying to the sandbox, whether it's a payment system provider, whether it's a crowdfunding player, or collective investment scheme, whatever you think about it. And the third way that we've seen is that sometimes the sandbox is given entirely to an external vendor. So they actually run it as an external source. So they just have people as external consultants running the entirety of the sandbox. Now, this will also create some issues, like Hakima mentioned, about the reasons, Morocco's reasons for particularly not having a sandbox, about the conflicts of interest and potentially the issues of creating unlevel playing fields. One of the ways to actually get around this is to have much more clear and transparent sort of eligibility criteria, or FAQs that tell firms how exactly they've been working with it. But again, depending on what the hypothesis, the cost, both in terms of actual monetary value as well as human resources, is a really, really important aspect that needs to be considered before embarking on sort of a sandbox journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'd like to follow on this with our regulators, because I think the human resources are really an important question that many of them press away or think about. So maybe let me turn to Mel. We've heard now from Sharmista about how the regulatory sandbox initiatives can be structured in different organizational structures, and also the question of human resources being one of the key components and sort of source of cost. Is it similar thing for your test and learn approach? Do you also, is human resources essential component? How do you structure those initiatives? How do you source them? And what kind of expertise you think is needed to implement the test and learn approach in terms of the profile of the employees assigned to it?
Thanks, Ivo. Of course, we value people in the BSP, but I think, but being more than a resource, I think I would like to think that it's really the appreciation among all of us that this test and learn approach is not only a tool but a mindset. It's really a shared value which help us navigate and operationalize this test and learn approach. Of course, it is imperative for us to invest in our people with education, with training, and for them to utilize tools to build a collaborative environment within our workplace. And I think other than human resource, it is also important for us to allot time and provide a conducive environment for collaborative exchanges between the BSP and other players, and the players themselves, whether incumbents or new entrants, exchanges between the BSP and other central banks, between the BSP and other financial regulators, so that we are on the same boat. We have the same on the same boat. So we recently hired a lot of people. In fact, some of them are part of this webinar. We have, of course, on the cyber aspect, we have certified ethical hackers. We have blockchain professionals, because a lot of the solutions being proposed for test and learn are related to blockchain. So again, we really need to invest in education and training, because at the end of the day, we cannot regulate what we don't understand.
Well, I may come back to this, and let me just encourage our attendees to post questions via the chat function, because we'll be very soon opening the Q&A session. But the point of hiring new people, you mentioned cyber, you mentioned blockchain, obviously you mentioned continuous training. I'd like to ask Shemaya with the Sandbox unit, and I was really fortunate enough to get to know the people in Kenya. Did you have to hire new people because of the need for a specific profile? We heard from Mel 2 examples, but I can imagine there are more that we could probably cite. Or how did you go about building internally the expertise needed to run a regulatory sandbox, especially when it comes to a novel innovation? And
Thank you.
Yeah. over to you.
Thank you, Ivo. I think we got a lot of support from CGAP at some point. And as you say, it's a very tricky issue. We currently have a committee which is multi-departmental because we feel perhaps there are certain things. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you very well, yes.
Yeah, so I think we have just picked representatives from different functions and then placed them in a committee which actually assesses the applications which we receive. We find this to be more effective because we have different ideas which are more in different functions, and therefore putting them together in maybe say a group where they can share ideas works for us well. Because one, you may have a sandbox which is generally on process. For example, we got one which was on biometrics, just how do you ensure your clients' procedures have been automated and properly working. So you find this requires very general skills, and therefore you want people who have had an opportunity working within that area. We have specific interests around enabling market in terms of process to access certain things. So the addition there is the ICT or technology angle, and therefore you also require people from ICT. So for us, we see this as an evolving kind of function, and we are using multi-departmental representatives to have a team which can have ideas which, of course, some are very new, but people who sort of understand some of the aspects that they are being presented with. However, I think it's a discussion of whether it can sit in one function, and we find maybe this is a sort of debate will go in maybe after some time. But for us, it's serving well when we have many representatives from different functions within the regulator.
Thank you, Shamai. I think it's very encouraging to hear that you can actually just get involved people from different departments who may already have the expertise needed to run the sandbox, like the ICT that you mentioned. So let me turn to some of the Q&A questions. I've noted those that we, I think, addressed in our discussion, but I think one that is really important is around challenges. And I really like to hear from all of you. So let me frame it this way. Can each of you say what are the 3 key challenges that you see in your jurisdiction or more globally in implementing your initiative? So in case of, I'll start with Hakima, it would be the fintech window, then let's maybe go with Mel on the test and learn, then Shamaya on sandbox, and then we'll hear from Sharmista and Sean what they generally observe in their client countries. So if you can name 3 challenges that you've encountered in implementing your initiative. Hakima, over to you.
Thank you, Ivo. I think the main challenge for me and also for the regulator is to ensure this balance between the added value of the innovation and the new risks proper to it. We should develop an appropriate approach. This is the big challenge. To put in place this appropriate approach for regulated innovation based on the proportionality of mitigating risk, just to be able to foster innovation in a very secure environment. The second, or the other challenge is about the human resources skills and expertise. What we observe is that the technology evolution is more complex and rapid. The business model presented by the new actors are more challenging for regulators. So we need, as regulators, to reinforce our capacity and expertise in many fields in order to achieve our mandate in a proper way. Thank you.
Thank you. Great points. So Mel, over to you. What do you see as three key challenges in running your testing and learn approach? So this time we lost Mel? No. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still here. Sorry. Yes, Ivo. In terms of the challenges, I think the first one is being able to keep that beginner's mind, that attitude of openness, because regulators are normally wired to operate using well-established standards, using well-established rules. So that for me is a challenge. Second, I think is also similar to what the other speakers have mentioned. It's really striking the right balance between regulation and market forces, between regulation versus flexibility and openness. And the third one, I think, is making sure that that the framework for collaboration is working. Again, not only this part of collaboration among central banks, but really collaboration among the different financial regulators. I mentioned about being on the same boat, having the same mindset, and because of the interdependencies of the oversight function. So that has to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Mel. And Wycliffe Shamaya, what you've observed as the key challenges in implementing the sandbox so far. And I will also later then ask Sharmista and Sean to also think about what they've seen as responses to those challenges, some of them that we've heard.
Thank you, Ivo. There are three main challenges we face here. The first one is when an innovator graduates from the sandbox, I think there is the issue of startup capital, because in most cases, these are young people who have ideas, they don't have a lot of resources. So I guess it is us then thinking of how do we promote people who have ideas, then to graduate them into real value so that they hit the market actually with capacity to scale up those ideas. I think that is the first challenge. The second challenge is around intellectual rights. An idea becomes very nice if it has succeeded through the sandbox, and you find the parties who are involved initially don't have very clear understandings and agreements. And therefore, as an idea becomes big, more valuable, we've seen a bit of disputes. It looks like maybe they were not ready to hit the market, because then one claims the idea, another one claims facilitation, then you nearly lose that idea, which is very good. Now, the other challenge, which has been very, very, very disturbing, is where we have conflicting laws. And I know Mel has mentioned to this, because we may be willing to pass certain ideas which may not be accepted by other sectors. And most obviously, there are aspects which are cross-cutting. For example, with due respect, I know the central banks are very keen on issues around cryptocurrencies, and therefore anything to do with crypto, whether it's just an asset, I think they are very careful. So you may be handling an idea which is around crypto, which is actually a good idea, but for them, it will be something which cannot be allowed to run. So I guess the conflicting legal frameworks within the financial sector then become a bit of impediment. And therefore, we are wondering if this idea cross-cuts, then how do we agree to ensure that we get money from that idea? I think those are some of the things that we see very real as we handle issues.
So you mentioned a very important keyword, and we've got actually a question on this from the audience. And again, I encourage attendees to keep sending questions, because I will try to introduce them through the conversation. So we got a question specifically on that point to you, saying that basically asking how CMA is treating the crypto space, and whether you're receiving more crypto applications in the sandbox, and whether you are considering coming up with regulations for crypto assets more generally. So can you just briefly answer that question, since you already mentioned that point?
In fact, most of the new applications we receive are around crypto assets, quite a number on tokenization and other assets, which you will know. And therefore, for us, it's a reality. I think we are talking in terms of what is for us in securities markets and the other sectors within the financial sector. Because, for example, if you talk about ICOs, initial coin offerings, they would be very valid assets. Even the process, of course, if at all they are within what is prescribed and they're raising money, fiat money from the public, and of course, there is a bit of protection of investors who are getting into this kind of issuances. I think we are likely to be, of course, amenable to say proceed. However, you know very well when you talk about cryptocurrencies, then you have your central bank asking a lot of questions. So in a brief response, yes, most of the ideas we are receiving are around blockchain, crypto assets, and all those kinds of products, which are very new. And our thinking is we want to have a framework which is a bit like very at high level, not to impede what we see as new ideas, but at least to ensure people who are in there, whether they are issuers, whether they are investors, they are well protected. So yes, we are thinking of a framework. We are already working on a policy. Of course, we want to involve the whole stakeholders so that we are not just slicing a piece and then leaving. And that space is so moving very fast. So you see, those are things we are going through as we look at what would be the policy if we want to think about a framework.
Thank you. Well, you might have made somebody very excited right now. So let me turn to Sharmista. And, you know, the question really is about the challenges and how to address them. But if you will, I would ask specifically about one challenge that we've repeatedly heard about, which is around collaboration, cross-cutting innovation. And we do have also a question from our audience, which broadens it beyond just collaboration among regulators towards collaboration with fintech incubators, accelerators, and more generally stakeholders in the market. And so I'd be curious to hear from you both, you know, on the challenges that you see and how they're being addressed, but specifically that collaboration one. And I'll also ask Sean a similar question later. So Sharmista, over to you. Thanks, Ivo.
That's a really interesting question, and I think collaboration among regulators themselves, especially as Shamia mentioned, that there are a number. So, you know, we've always been used to firms falling between in a certain vertical, but right now with fintech firms, they are going across a number of different, mandates of different regulators. So that collaboration between regulators is actually very important. And one jurisdiction that I've seen that has done it really well is South Africa, where, as some of you might know, they have an intergovernmental fintech working group, and they run the sandbox and they run the accelerator, everything together. So it has been a really good example of how it's worked. They are in their very initial stages, so we still, again, it's quite early days, so we still need to see how this is actually going to work. Other areas that we've seen in places like Mexico is that, there have been groups that have established to look at fintech, when fintechs come in as an eligibility, to look at it together to say which mandate does it impact. And this is, again, something that we did in the UK. So for the FCA sandbox, when they got firms that came in, the Bank of England would actually sit in on that decision panel to say, does it impact our objectives? And, is there something that we need to do there? So one of these, these relationships and actually forming committees, whether they're decision-making or just for information, I think is something really useful, and regulators should be considering that. Your other question about your related one about relationships with external bodies, fintechs, and sort of accelerators and incubators. Now, regulators have sort of a very fine balance in the sense that they need to promote competition, but they also need to not have conflicts of interest and create an unlevel playing field. So if they say that anyone who's in our sandbox can have access to all these other different types of capital, it could potentially create an unlevel playing field. But one market that has actually done this quite well is, I think, Brazil. The regulators and the sandboxes themselves have a relationship with LIFT. I think it's called the Laboratory of Financial Technology. I can't fully remember, but the acronym is LIFT. And so the incubator and the accelerator actually helps firms that are in the sandbox through the process, and then actually supports them as they exit the sandbox process as well. So it isn't just regulators looking at the risks and the challenges around that, but they're also looking at how does, after the exit, what happens? How does this firm actually take its product to market? Some people might argue that it is not the role of the regulators to help firms take their product to market. But I think when fintech comes into play, regulators have it's a two-pronged approach. Yes, you look at the risk, but you also need to foster fintech. The other quick challenges that I'll just throw out there before you open up to Sean is, consumer protection issues. Some firms that we've spoken to have actually said that the sandbox process has been long and convoluted. So actually taking it to market directly without going through the sandbox process would have been more time effective for them. And they mainly went through the sandbox to get recognition from the regulators and sort of a signaling to say that, this is an approved model. So it's been a bit of a tug of war there. And the last challenge I'll say, which I think some of our panelists have already mentioned before, is the legislative challenges. While we have seen, and Ivo, we saw this in our study as well, that, common law and civil law countries and hybrid countries have equally all implemented sandboxes, it is just a little bit simpler to do in common law countries because they don't need to go through a legislative hurdle of trying to put that into place. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Excellent. Great points. Thanks, Sharmista. So, Sean, similar question, but let me build on what we've already heard from Sharmista. You've been for a long time arguing that regulatory sandbox is not the only solution, that it's very important for regulators to build an ecosystem of initiatives and be very careful about which initiatives they implement and which they don't, also for the reasons that we've heard about, such as resources. So let me ask you, how do you think regulators should assess feasibility of those initiatives? Because this is clearly one of the challenges that they face at the very beginning. What initiative, what tool to choose from? And I know that you recently authored a report that has a decision tree that should help regulators to pick the right initiative and maybe build that ecosystem where also other stakeholders can be involved, such as incubators and fintech offices and fintech hubs. So, how do you think about the universe of available tools and how to navigate through it?
Thank you. Again, building on the last conversation where we left off, we pause for a minute to think that the exam question here is how to get good technology responsibly to the market to serve consumers. And Sandbox is framed as a way of accelerating that process or lowering the cost for innovators to bring good products to market. Now, what we've just heard is lots of activity to simply coordinate a regulatory examination of those questions. So MOUs between central banks and prudential regulators, dedicated human resources to conduct testing, review of applications. I mean, that sounds to me, and if you're just kind of coming to this subject whole, like a lot of regulatory apparatus for the purpose of lowering regulatory costs and bringing something responsibly to the marketplace. So the first question I would ask, and it's a question that we ask in the paper, is what can you do? Take a hard look at your entire set of regulatory tools, including your existing licensing processes, your existing supervisory processes, and ask whether there are ways to modernize those existing tools to make them more innovation friendly. Maybe it's creating a new regulatory category, a new licensing category that's available to everyone that simply allows you to operate with a limited number of customers, and then only then, once you've kind of proven your concept in the marketplace, then go forward with a more fulsome licensing process. So I think there are, what the paper does is it asks regulators every step along the way whether there is some intervention other than a sandbox which might serve those efforts, that might be cheaper, that might not have as many distortionary effects on the marketplace. As has been mentioned, a common critique, well, two common critiques of sandboxes are, one, that they unnecessarily privilege the firms who are in the sandbox, giving them potentially a leg up in the regulatory process or giving them better access to capital or so forth. The other critique, and there's a question in the chat about this, which is absolutely right, is innovation can come from all over the marketplace, not just from innovators. It can come from corporates. It can come from regulated entities. And so you have to ask yourself whether the sandbox becomes a de facto gating process for allowing innovations to reach the marketplace, which might have just gotten there anyway through a more streamlined traditional licensing or regulatory process.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. We're heading towards the end of the session, but I'll still want to address some of the questions that we've got through the Q&A. One is related to the practical example of regulatory treatment of some of the innovation. And I think we've heard quite a bit from Shemaya about example. We've heard also from Hakima some examples. So I will mention one specific thing that is becoming a very popular topic these days, which is digital banking and digital banks and licensing for digital banks. And I'd like to ask Mel, because Philippines is one of those countries where we actually do see digital banks operating, and I know that there is one sort of newcomer called Tonic, and I've read recently that the central bank is actually creating a test and learn environment for Tonic to test their solution and perhaps provide input into thinking about digital banking license. I don't know if it's true, but I would like to hear from you, Mel. What's the situation there and how you're thinking about digital banking using test and learn approach?
Yeah. So you're right, Ivo. We have approved Tonic recently, and it's not under the test use of the traditional banking license. So it's a traditional banking license for a digital bank digital technology-centric bank like Tonic Bank. But we are also right now in the process, but we also realize that it's like imposing analog rules to digital platforms. So that's why we are in the process right now, and hopefully before the year ends, we will be issuing a new digital banking circular. So it creates a distinct classification. So there are now 7 or 8 classifications. So digital bank will now be a distinct classification. So it provides the rules on the capitalization, how digital banks should operate, and we also because we also realize that digital bank, a digital-centric business model is underpinned by robust, secure, resilient technology infrastructure. That's why there's a special focus on that and digital governance. But that said, we also recognize that digital banks may also be subject to the same type of liquidity, credit, market risk. That's why we will also impose the same corporate governance and risk management standards that are applicable also to traditional banks. But that has to be with due regard to the application of the principle of proportionality.
Excellent. Great. Well, thanks for shedding more light on that initiative. I know there is a lot of interest in this topic and people are watching Philippines. So one of the last questions that I'd like to address, there is Shah already mentioned that innovation may really come from different sources. And I'd like to turn to Hakima for the question of, sometimes innovation doesn't really concern the end user, but the regulator and supervisor themselves. And you talked about the RegTech solutions for reporting purposes, for example. And I think many regulators are interested in that RegTech and SupTech space, but maybe wondering, what does it take to make the technological leap as an agency and start implementing technology to improve the regulatory and supervisory processes? What is needed? How do you identify the right solutions and how do you implement them? So what's your experience with that and how the central bank is thinking about RegTech and SupTech? And can some of those innovation facilitators help to promote those initiatives? Hakima, over to you.
Yeah, Yes, I will. We have this some echo. We have seen in the Central Bank the benefits to introduce a new technology and rethink our manner to process our oversight. We with the assistance and technical assistance of World Bank, we are now in with the role of our lab innovation. We are now conducting a new manner of how to collect the regulator the reporting from FMIs, our financial markets infrastructure, from the banks and from payment establishments. And up to now, we have launched already this new way to collect reporting from the FMI based on APIs. So I think it's a great change in how we have to manage and to run our oversight. That's for our internal organization, and by this way we push change and in our the actors under the supervision of Central Bank to use also RegTech to be compliant in the rules of the Central Bank.
Thank you. I think this is really a great example and nice note to end on. Let me just ask Mel if you can please mute yourself. We're getting echo from your side. So let me thank all the panelists, Shamaya, Hakima, Mel, Sharmista, and Shan, for great presentations and sharing your experience and insights. I hope that our attendees got some interesting insights for that. Judging from the Q&A session and the fact that questions keep coming, I guess so. Thank you also, Greta, for joining us and setting the scene with your great opening remarks. And obviously, thanks to all attendees for joining us today and participating in this webinar, which will be recorded and made available to all of you. Just to summarize some of the key points, I've been taking a lot of notes, and I just like to highlight only a few points. One is that what we heard is really that there are different journeys and different tools that regulators can choose from in order to address and harness innovation. Regulatory sandbox is one of them, but there are other ones. Those tools are very important, not just on their own, but because they create a dialogue between regulators and innovators and help to generate insights. And most importantly, they help regulators to react more quickly to what's happening in their market in terms of the regulatory measures and change that they implement in reaction to the innovation and technology. And I think that's probably the key message to really take away from this presentation. And then we also heard about the importance of taking into consideration the local specific factors that determine success of initiatives such as Sandbox, but other, which is the legal and regulatory framework, the market, how many fintechs operate in the market, what kind of fintechs, available resources and capacity. Although we've heard very encouraging words that capacity very often already exists within the regulator, but it's important to really think creatively about getting different departments involved. And finally, the success of Sandbox really depends on clearly defined objectives and KPIs that support those objectives. If you want to learn more about this topic, you can visit one of the many resource hubs at cgap.org/sandbox. You've heard references to other important reports as well, so I encourage you to go and see some of them. With that, I'd like to thank you for being with us. Thanks to all the panelists, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.